Hi, welcome to PCMag Live. I'm Sascha Segan, he's Will Greenwald, and we're here in the PCMag Labs in New York City to bring you the 3 top tech news stories of the day, one cool thing we're testing in our labs, and answer one of your reader questions. So let's get to it. The biggest story of the day is Target, probably at this point the most ironically named company on Earth, has confirmed that it was told about its gigantic cyber breach that stole 40 million credit card numbers, but didn't act on the warning. A company called FireEye logged the breach as a malware binary, but Target said, "We get so many alerts each day, well, we just missed it." I mean, if anything is to prove to you that you should pay attention to when your security contractors and independent security companies are saying you have a security hole, this should be it.
Their official statement released earlier is, despite the fact that we invested hundreds of millions of dollars in data security, had a robust system in place, and had recently been certified as PCI compliant, the unfortunate reality as we experienced a data breach. Like any large company, each week at Target, there are a vast number of technical events, etc., logged.
In spite of spending hundreds of millions of dollars on this, we decided not to read and act on all the emails we got, and as a result, all of your credit cards got stolen. When the way this comes to you, the viewer, is that you know how you've been putting off doing that Windows update for like 3 weeks because you don't want to reboot your computer?
It's like that, okay? But bigger.
You are Target. Okay, you are a target. You are also, you're like Target, which is a target, and that's like what I was saying at the beginning. You know how you haven't wanted to run that update on your phone for ages because you might not get a text message in the 10 minutes while it's updating? You are a target. Do this.
Which is a very good question, though, in terms of liability. Not if you're personal, but if you haven't run that update in ages and you're a small business, maybe you handle a few dozen credit cards from your clients, are you liable if there's a breach because you didn't update it? And could Target be considered liable in some way since they said, we knew, but we didn't do anything because we get too much info?
We're not lawyers, but we're sure there are thousands of lawyers around the country working on this question as we speak. Yeah. Speaking of law, there is a new law coming to the European Union, and it is one phone charger to rule them all. This is something the EU has been talking about for years, which is mandating a common charger on all mobile phones and handheld devices, which will probably be micro USB or a variant of micro USB like the micro USB 3 that Samsung is using on the Galaxy Notes. This is a problem for a couple of major mobile manufacturers.
Apple?
Yes. This is most of it is a problem for Apple because it means it's the death of Lightning. Now, we're unclear as to whether the law will allow for every Apple product to be shipped with a Lightning to micro USB adapter and therefore get around the issue, or whether this is going to force every Apple product sold in the EU to be micro USB. But even beyond that, for instance, Samsung uses both standard micro USB and micro USB 3 connectors. It's unclear whether they will continue to be allowed to use both kinds of connectors. So eventually this is going to make it a lot more convenient for everybody because we're all going to be able to interchange power supplies on mobile devices and just plug anything into anything else into the wall.
Well, this is for chargers, but would an adapter also support data for Lightning? And if that's the case, could we see a huge gray market of micro USB to Lightning adapters coming into the US because it's something that would really be useful for all of us?
Well, and is Apple going to have to make or going to want to make separate models for Europe, maybe with the micro USB, and then for the rest of the world with Lightning to keep a grip on its lucrative Lightning accessories market?
And would this apply to tablets as well, the iPad?
Yeah, these are all big questions. It's going to take at least 2 years for this law to be implemented because now that it's an EU directive, it has to be passed down to the individual nations which need to pass laws. But keep an eye on this. It may solve your problem of chaotic connectors throughout your mobile devices, but it'll be really interesting to see how it shakes out. Finally, actually, I think our last, Will, I think you need to explain our last story.
John McAfee is an amazing individual. He seems to be the love child of Tony Stark, Daniel Plainview, and Gary Busey. Basically, he recently had an interview with usesthis.com?
Yep.
Yeah. And he said some very interesting things.
Is John McAfee your hero?
No, but he is a person of interest.
Okay.
Some of the
and
things
John
he
McAfee
said,
does, in fact, have a secret system, a machine that is monitoring everything you do.
He has many, I think. and it's all powered by giant piles of Coke. His favorite software is the XM153 remote control software that comes with the XM153 50 caliber machine gun, which is a tank-mounted turret machine gun that is basically like this, but big and shoots bullets, not foam.
Go read this interview with John McAfee. John McAfee is the no longer reclusive multimillionaire who founded McAfee Antivirus, got into a lot of legal trouble in Belize, and now kind of
accused of murder.
Yes, and now kind of traipses around the world doing this like bikini dancers and blow show wherever he goes.
It's kind of like a drugged up information age version of Kung Fu.
Okay, but
one interesting thing though, it makes me kind of question his gun credibility. He said that his favorite tools for national security consulting are primarily a semi-auto .22 rifle with a silencer. Fair enough. But he then says these are virtually completely silent, and not sure if silencers really work that way even with the .22, and can go through car doors and other light armor. .22 is not a very powerful cartridge, and I don't believe there are any actual armor-piercing .22 rounds available.
So we ask you, the viewer, if you are a fan of firearms, which firearm should John McAfee be using for his national security consulting? Let's move on now to our reader question. Larva, through the message boards, asks, what turn-based RPGs would you recommend? I've heard about Angry Birds Epic, which seems like an easy way to get into this, but I have little experience with turn-based RPGs. Will and I have very different opinions on this, but I'm going to let you go first.
The question is, do you want to play real video games or do you want to play diversions on your smartphone or tablet? If you want real video games, the 3DS and Vita have a lot of great options. If you want to play little baby games, your Android phone's fine.
Recommend names.
Okay. Vita, which very underrated, but the Slim's coming out in a month, no, in a few months, for $200. Persona 4, one of the best Japanese role-playing games of the last decade. Final Fantasy X and X-2 HD. A lot of classics available from the PlayStation age. Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9. For the 3DS, Bravely Default recently came out. It's excellent. There are several very good DS Final Fantasy remakes from back when they were turn-based. Even if you search for it, it's hard to find now, but Chrono Trigger DS, virtually identical port of the Super Nintendo version and one of the best Japanese role-playing games of all time.
And meanwhile, on Android and iOS, where I play my turn-based RPGs, you can get all of the first 6 Final Fantasies. Skip the first 2, I would say, go straight to 3.
I'm not even sure if 3 is all that strong. I think 4 is really
okay. To get. But you can get all the first 6 Final Fantasies. They're a little expensive. If you want a cheaper entry into the genre, go with one of the games published by Kemco. Unlucky Hero is my favorite one right now. That's generally between $4 and $7 depending on sales. It's a good 10 hours of fun. It'll get you introduced to the genre.
Square Enix is very bizarre when it comes to mobile game pricing because their remake games are, what, $12 about? In that range?
16.
16.
Yeah.
You can get the Final Fantasy Anthology and Collection for the PS1 on your Vita, which is a classic, and you can play it on your PS3 for $6, and they include Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, which are 2 of the best games you can get of ever. And even barring that, Virtual Console, 3DS, Virtual Console Wii, a lot of old stuff that for the consoles, and if you get them through Steam, if you get them through any real game system, they cost a third or half as much as Square Enix wants to charge for mobile.
Now, can you play Final Fantasy VI on this?
If you can get a cartridge, yes.
This is our one cool thing for the day. It is the Retro Duo Portable. And Will, what the heck is this thing?
This is a portable Super Nintendo. Old school cartridge fans might consider this a spiritual successor to the Sega Nomad, which let people play Genesis cartridges on the go. This can play Super Nintendo, and the screen's not great, but we will try to get you to see it. My own copy of Killer Instinct is in here, and it is loading just fine. It just loads slowly because the little splash screen. Nintendo, Killer Instinct, it's a cool game. And there's a sequel on the Xbox now. It is $90, available online, ThinkGeek, Amazon, distributed by a company called NX that does a lot of these retro systems. And what's really cool, yes, it's a portable game system, but it has an AV out so you can connect it to your TV. And it comes with a port to connect 2 Super Nintendo controllers. So you can actually turn this into a full functional Super Nintendo. And one more thing, it has the retro port included, which turns it into a functional NES system, so you can play NES games. See?
So, Will, where do you suggest people get these original Super Nintendo and NES cartridges?
That is, eBay is the most obvious choice depending on where you live, because the markets can vary greatly between very populated areas full of hipsters like New York or elsewhere, rural areas. Thrift stores, Salvation Army, Goodwill, any of those places, yard sales, thrift shops, besides those two big ones. Pretty much any of those, you might find cartridges, but it's always a crapshoot and you can't be certain whether they will work. But on the bright side, if you get them at a thrift place, they're usually like $3 and it's worth it.
And when's the review going up?
Good question. We actually reviewed the bigger brother of that, the Retro Trio, the Super Retro Trio, which can do NES, Super Nintendo, and Sega Genesis, and with an adapter do Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games as well, which actually got an editor's choice.
Okay.
This is a bit older. The screen isn't great, but it's super cool if you don't want to find an actual Super Nintendo and want to play your classic games.
So you can find our review of the Retro Trio up on PCMag.com, and that's PCMag Live for today. We will see you guys next week. Thanks a lot.
Doodles.